A number of cases I had in St. Louis, we would go to
But Teitzen Elizabeth was always involved.
what?
He has a Besdin tights.
That's where we would handle it. For the ones that I would go with when I was in New Jersey. And
okay. Is everybody here?
no, I mean
No. I'm
not in the room yet.
Was everybody in Shul
A number of people were in Shul
that are not yet here?
that are not in the room yet, right? How can we go? They're out celebrating already.
So they had a whole tumult in Israel.
What?
They had a whole tumult in Israel.
But why don't they postpone when Yom Yerushalayim was on Erev Shabbos?
Excellent question. Maish and I were discussing that 3 or 4 months ago in terms of when to do
It's
the
not a
shul
holiday. Why should you be
program.
doing
And Maish had used some of his connections when we were making the program as to try to find out.
They are docha, I think, Yom Ha'atzma'ut.
That
Right.
they do, but
But
not for Yom
But
Yerushalayim.
this,
They did
neither
not.
one is a holiday.
Okay.
Depends what your
Eh,
philosophy.
Bob,
No.
Bob,
This was-
Yeah.
they
Bob,
said-
there is a rule
Yeah.
that without a Sanhedrin, we cannot change any of the rules or do things like add holidays. You see in the Megillah, where Esther had a nudge of the Sanhedrin a couple of times before they accepted Purim. You can't make a new thing. There is no Sanhedrin, there's no central authority to do it.
But there a Kashiva, Talmidei
There are people who do what they want to do. Yeah, I mean, everybody does what he wants to do, but that's not part of Judaism. All right.
Okay.
So why
We
don't-
gratefully,
yeah, do the sponsors and then we'll.
the Gouda doesn't do anything.
Of course, a Gouda doesn't do anything, but I don't hold by a Gouda.
Okay, fine. We gratefully acknowledge the generosity of our various learning sponsors. Isaac, a year of learning, Isaac and Evelyn Blacher in memory of his sister, Chaya Rachel Bas Iser, friends of Leonie Meiselman, Leah Sabra Bas Chanach Zundel, friends of Mela Skatsky, Moshe Zelig, Ben Mordechai, Martin Lipman and family in memory of his wife, Malka Chana Bas Pinchas. Friends of Herb Jeremiah, Zvi Ben Zev, friends of Sam Coleman, Shmuel Ben Yaakov, friends of Gideon Lozinski, Mordechai Shlomo Ben Meir, Bella and David Adler in memory of her father, Eliyahu Ben Yosef Cohen. People inspired by Rebbitzin Shapiro, Sarah Esther, Malka Bas Meshulam Yisachar. Month of learning. Friends and students of Rabbi Sholem Kornblum, Rav Sholem Ben Mordechai, Susan and Reuven Podolsky in memory of her father, Simcha Bunin Ben Yoshua, and Susan and Reuven Podolsky in memory of her mother, Chaya Bas Avram Dov. Michael and Judith Peretsky in memory of his mother, Rachel Bas Avraham, and Judith and Michael Peretsky, notice the shinui there, in memory of her mother, Reisel Bas Yehuda Lev. P. Pizer in memory of her father, Yisachar Ben Shmuel. Stanley Presser in memory of his wife, Chayalea Bas Zev Cohen. Malka and Rebbe Yaakov, Dr. Yaakov Heinig in memory of her aunt, Emma Ittel Bas Shimon. Week of Learning, Eliana Goldwasser in memory of her husband, Eliyahu Ben Mordechai, Yossi and Sipi Peleg. Memory of his mother, Shprinza Bas Akiva. Ernie Bloom in memory of his father, Benjamin Ben Moshe. These are days. Ernie Bloom in memory of his father, Benjamin Ben Moshe Kohen. Judy Fuchs in memory of her sister, Cyril Bas Eliyahu. And Judy and Bob Thaler in memory of her mother, Hannah Bas Dov.
And the Shalosh Shudas.
Oh, and that's not on here. You have it on that one.
It's sponsored by Howard Fleischman in memory of his father, Yosef Ben Chaim Halevi.
Okay, so underlying today's discussion, so I'll just refer back to it. Machlokes, we know the guy has to come, the messenger, and he has to say, I saw it written, I saw it signed. And he's verifying that the text and the content and the intent of the get is correct, mistama, as well as that the edim on the get are kosher. So we had a machlokes between Rava and Rabba. Rava said the reason he has to do that is because we're worried that in Chutz La'aretz they're not so makbid, and maybe the Sofrim don't know it has to be written Lishma. Rabba said, Fakert, he said, no, the problem is you're going to bring a signed document from Spain or from Rome or from somewhere else, and nobody in Israel recognizes those signatures. There are no documents on file in Beis Din with those signatures, and those guys themselves are not here, which are the three ways to verify a signature. Therefore, you need at least one aid to verify the signature. Okay, so now we are at the bottom of Beis Amid Beis. You just needed that background. Now, at the bottom of Beis Amid Beis, we're going to start 2 lines from the bottom. V'afila Rebbe Meir. Now, one of the answers that we had given earlier was 9 out of 10, 99 out of 100, a solid row of Sofrim and Chutz La'aretz do know what they're doing. And min haTorah, if you have a rov kakulo. So there should not be a problem with the content of the get being written properly and being lishma. But afilu Rabbi Meir, the chayesh lemiyuta, Rabbi Meir says in something so important as a get, you do have to be worried about the 2 or 3 sofrim out there that may not know what they're doing. Stam sofre, daine migmar, gemire, that the typical sofer is working under the authority of a Beis Din, and they are instructing him, so it's you have a greater assurance than just some people. Most people know you have a virtual certainty. Now it's virtual, but you have a virtual certainty because there could be a Beis Din that doesn't know. But typically, everything is done kedas and kedin in Chutz La'aretz as well. And therefore, the get is valid min haTorah, and you wouldn't need any certification whatsoever that could be mailed in. You wouldn't need a shaliach to come and testify. V'rabbanan hu de'itzrich, and it's the rabbis that require the certification. So therefore, I'm adding this. If it's the rabbis who require certification, it should be that there needs to aid him. That the shliach has to bring a buddy with him who also can testify that everything is kedas and kedin, including the signatures. Umishum iguna, because of the possibility that the woman, that if the get is not accepted, the woman would be an aguna, and her husband thinks he's in Spain. He thinks they're divorced, so he's not sending her any money. And she's now from eating from the tamchoy, and she can never get out of that situation. Ikulu be rabbanan, the rabbis created, since they created the stringency of requiring witnesses, they modified their own rule, because when they write the rule, they can write it the way they want. And they said, we'll be makil and require only one witness. So that solves one problem, but it sets up a new problem. Is it really a leniency? Chumrahu. it could, in some circumstances, wind up being a stringency. And if it is a stringency and she remarries, her kids are mamzerim. So it's a very serious issue. If you were to stick with the standard rule of 2 witnesses, lo asibal ma'arer upasil, then once there are 2 witnesses, the Bezdin accepts the get, case is closed, and it can't be appealed or reopened because you had 2 witnesses. Chad. But if you only had 1 witness, asibal uma'arer upasil, at a later date, the husband could show up, say, you guys made a mistake taking that. I never was involved in writing it. And he would, the get would be retroactively invalidated, and any new children would be mamzerim. So that becomes an incredible chumrah on the woman. So the Gemara says, "Kaven da amar mar bifnei kama noslan loy." How many people, when you deliver the get to the lady, you don't ring her doorbell and hand her the get. You have to have witnesses to that process. Okay, and there's a machlokes. How many witnesses need be present? Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Chanina, they have a dispute. You need a minimum of 2 witnesses. But Gimel, and one says no, 2 isn't enough. You need at least 3. So so now this man is coming from Spain with this get, and he is presenting it to her in front of witnesses, perhaps even in front of a bezdin. So if it turns out that it's not valid, he's in trouble. He's going to be incredibly embarrassed. So me'ikora, me'dak dayik. So in order to avoid his being the brunt of an avla, he is going to do his due diligence before he comes. He's literally, the word means he's going to investigate thoroughly. To prevent himself from a subsequent embarrassment. So therefore, we have a solid grounds to say that 1 witness is 1 testimony, the shliach, would be adequate. Going back, when Rava, who said that the rationale for his needing to testify that these signatures are valid and this get is valid, his rationale is because there's nobody here in Israel who would be able to verify that get those signatures. Leboy Trey. So again, going back to the initial question, if the issue is validating the signatures, the normative halacha is there should be 2 witnesses. Which would be the same rule for an IOU or a property transfer or a slave transfer or the transfer of property, buying a house. Normative procedure is contracts are signed by 2 witnesses and they're verifiable. And the verification, if the witnesses who signed aren't present, require 2 witnesses. So that should be the normal standard. So the Gemara comes on to a principle we've learned earlier. A single witness is valid in cases of Iser v'heter. Now, every one of us applies that rule every single day. Because you go home and you eat the dinner your wife made. Because your wife made it and you trust her. So she is effectively an aid echad to the meal being kosher and you accept it. And since it's your wife, we come back to the concept that once we say Eid Echad Neman Yisurin, we relax the rules of Eidus, and somebody who would normally not be a kosher aid, like a woman, would be an acceptable witness. Amar the Amrin and Eid Echad Neman Yisurin. So we say that one witness is sufficient over here, mistama, because it's Isur V'Heter, Kigun. But now we're going to throw a monkey wrench. If you come home and you eat dinner, you have no knowledge of the food. Unless you do the shopping, you don't know where she bought the meat. But there's no chazaka. She bought the meat at Winn-Dixie. She could have bought the meat at the kosher counter at Winn-Dixie, or she could have bought the meat at Aroma. There's no chazaka one way or the other. Kigon chayaticha, like a piece of unidentified fatty meat. Suffix shel chalev, suffix shel shuman. It could be that that fat is forbidden fat, or it could be that that fat is kosher fat. So in such a case, the law is chazek isura. There is no chazaka that the meat is invalid or not kosher. So therefore, Eid Echad Neman B'Yisurin. Avol hacha, but regarding a married woman, is chazek isura de'eshes ish. There is a chazaka that she can't marry someone else or sleep with someone else because she has a chazaka of being a married woman. So have dvar shebe'erva. So now we take this circumstance and we don't say it's simply Isur V'Heter. We say it's a davar erva, that she would be committing a major league sin and offspring would be mamzerim, etc., etc. The ein davar shebe'erva pasuk mibeis mishnayim. We learned this earlier, that you need at least 2 witnesses to see that she had secluded herself. One wouldn't be enough because that's a davar erva. So the Gemara, so that's a solid, big, hard, solid question. So the Gemara answers, but you're operating under a certain misconception. You're operating under the misconception that Gittin are like other documents, and other documents require 2 witnesses. But the truth of the matter is, the dinhu from the Araisa level, the kiyum shtaros nami lo boy, that the truth of the matter is, regular contracts do not require verification. If there's a conflict and you go to Bezdin, so Bezdin midrabanan requires verification of the contract. But if Kenny wrote an IOU to me, I don't have to run to the ORB Bezdin. I just give him back his contract. He gives me my money. Normally, we don't require witnesses. The Reish Lakish, as Reish Lakish presents, the Amar Reish Lakish, Eidim de Chasumim al Hashtar, when witnesses sign a contract, Nasu Kami Shenechkara, a dusan bebezdin. We make the assumption that signing it in the presence of 2 witnesses, see, can he borrow money from me? And they verify by signing the IOU, it's as if that document was pre-certified as valid by a bezdin. And it's only rabbinic that any shtar requires verification through testimony if it's contested. Vahacha, when we're talking about a get written overseas, mishum iguna, based on the fact that if it's not accepted, the woman remains an iguna. Iklu be rabbanan, the rabbis were makil and permitted verification by only 1 witness, the shaliach who brought it, who testifies, I saw it written, I saw it signed. And now the Gemara goes through the same question. Hi, kulahi, is this really leniency? Chamurahi, it's really a stringency. The matzarchat le trey. If you had two witnesses, initially the shomer brought another witness with him. La ase bal ma'arer upasil. Then the husband would have no grounds to challenge it and invalidate it. Chad. But with only one witness, if the husband comes, it's one-on-one and they cancel out. Ase bal ma'arer upasil. Theoretically, the husband could show up at a later date and say, I never wrote that yet. The guy was lying, and the children of the next marriage would be mamzerim. So it's a big chumrah on the lady. So the Gemara responds, again, the same response. Since delivering the get requires witnesses, Kaven da Amar Mar Bifnei Kama Nasnule, how many witnesses need be there when she gets the get? Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Chanina, same issue. Chad Amar Bifnei Shtayim, Chad Amar Bifnei Gimel. One says two, one says three. The shaliach would do his due diligence, to prevent himself from being put in an embarrassing situation. Okay, so that resolves it, but now we still have on the table, why does Rava and Rabba disagree as to the rationale for the shaliach needing to make this affirmation? Rabba, my time, Rava. Why does Rabba not agree with Rabba? Amalach, he would tell you, me, Ketani, is the text of the Mishnah, the oath that the shaliach has to take, mipnei nichtam lishma, mipnei nachtam lishma. Does he have to say, I saw it written as a get from Reuven to Sarah, and I saw it signed. The witnesses knew it was a get between Reuven and Sarah? No. All he has to say, he leaves out the word Shema. All he has to say is the writing, I witnessed the signatures, and I verified that they're kosher. So he says leaving out the word means that's not an essential component. Varava kedinhu delisani hachi. He says you're right, and the Mishnah really should have put in the word lishma, except it becomes too complicated to make the pronunciation, and maybe he'll slip up and invalidate the get. Ella de'i mafshat le dibura. If we make his declaration longer, ase lemigzaye, it creates a greater chance of him leaving something out and puzzling the get. Hashtanami. So here too, the Gemara says, yeah, but you're requiring him to make two-word statements. You're not requiring him to make 2 3-word statements because you increase the possibility of a slip-up. But you still have 4 words to say, two-word statements. Hashtanami, ase lemigzaye. Maybe he would leave one of them out or one of those 4 words out. Chada mitlas guzes. If you have two-word phrases, it's virtually impossible for him to leave one of the words out. Chada mitrei. But as soon as you multiply to 2 3-word phrases, logozis, with 2 words he can't leave out, but with 1 word he might, 3 words he might. Now, that takes care of that. Now, that's why didn't Rava Rabba agreed with Rava. Rava, my time at Amar Rava. Why does he not agree with Rava? Amar Lach, he would answer you. Im Kain, Nisne Bifne Nichtam. If the whole point is to certify the signatures because there's nobody in Israel who can do it, so why does he have to say, I saw it written? All he has to say, theoretically, is here's a get, I watched it signed, I checked their kosher edim. Visulo, and that's all he'd have to say. Mipnei nichtav lomali, why does he have to testify as to the writing of the document? Shma mina be'inin l'shma. He says that it's implicit in the term I saw it written that it's lishma. You may not have to utter the word lishma, but it's implicit. If I saw it written, I'm going to make sure it's got the right text, and I'm going to make sure that the sofer was writing it lishma. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to say I saw it written. Okay, Rava, how would Rava respond to that? Bedinhu delisane hachi. You're right. The Mishnah should have only said he has to say the signatures are valid. Ella, however, the imkain, if that were the case, get is one of many kinds of contractual obligations. Ase l'ischalufe b'kiyum shtaras ta'alma. I might think. What? I'm not, but I might think that the same body of rules apply to get as apply to IOUs and house transfers and slave transfers and merchandise transfers. All contracts would have the same set of rules. And I want that not to be the case because we have this lenience over here of B'yed Echad, a single witness. So I might think if he didn't say I saw it written also, we might say it's like any other contract, because normal contracts, the contract would be 100% private. You cover the text of the contract and you say to two witnesses, Schwartz and I are in agreement, please sign your signatures. They don't have to know what's in the document. Yes.
Wasn't it a session that the concern is that people think these other documents
Could also
be
only
signed
need
by
one witness, right? So because we have the leniency by get, we buttress it with the quote stringency, my word, not the Gemara's, of I witnessed the writing as well. Okay, so Rava, what would he say over here? Midami is an agent's declaration that I saw it written and I saw it signed. Is that the same as verifying a normative contract, a house contract, an IOU, et cetera, Hasam, in normal cases, I said this outside, Yedinan, all that we have to prove is that the signatures are valid. Either the people who signed it come in and say, yep, that's my signature, or somebody who knows that witness says, yep, I see, he writes me checks all the time, that's his signature. Or we compare those signatures to other documents on file. We do not have to validate the text of the agreement. That stands on its own. So, hachi, but over here with the get, bifnei, you have to say, it was written in my presence. So it's a distinction. Hasam, with a regular contract, where you need two witnesses, Isha lo mehemna, a woman could not be one of the witnesses. Hacha Isha mehemna, here, since a woman is credible in the Bezdin, a woman could be the shliach and bring the get from Spain. Hasam, in the case of other contractual obligations, bal davar lo mehem none, I can't swear that Kenny owes me money. I'm a nogea b'davar. But hacha, in the case of a get, the lady could get her get in Spain, come to Israel, turn the get into a bezdin and say, I want to get married. Could you give me a permission slip that I'm a divorcee? And she is believed on her own, even though she's a woman, even though she's Nageya B'davar. Bal davar mehemnan, she is credible. So therefore, these are major differences between get and other contracts. Therefore, we require the double declaration. I saw it written, I saw it signed. For Rabba Amalach, but Rabba would respond to that. Atu hacha, when it comes to a get, ki amre yodinan, if somebody says, I recognize those signatures, mi lo mehemne, would we, in other words, if we were wrong, if there were people in Israel who recognized the signatures, wouldn't we accept that without the declaration from the shliach? Obviously, we would. And since they say we know about these signatures, they are credible. So in Mitzias, if that happened in a Bezdin, there would be no indication that Gittin are different than other documents, and we would assume that all documents are similar with regard to verification. So Be'ed Echad, with the one witness, so we need more. Okay. Ula Rabba Da'imer, according to Rabba Lefisha and Bekian Lishma. We're going back to the first argument. Maybe people in Italy aren't familiar with all the rules. Okay, man hai tana. So if that is the correct explanation, then who is the author of the Mishnah? The boy ksiva lishma, because we're implying now that simply saying I saw it written means that, and I'm aware that they followed all the rules, that they did do it lishma. Okay, oh boy, and we also require a statement, chasima lishma, it was signed and the witnesses knew it was a get, and the witnesses reviewed the text and the witnesses knew that the sofer wrote it lishma. So who could be the author? In other words, now when we've had these discussions, those are assumptions we're including are all in the Mishnah. Okay, Rebbe Meir, if you want to tell me it's Rebbe Meir, Chasima boy, all he requires is validating the signatures. Ksiva lo boy, he does not require validating the text of the get itself, that it was, the names are right, the dates are right. We accept all that on its face. The Tanan, we have the following Mishnah. That's a little tricky. When something has to be lishma, every factor has to be correct. Okay, if there's any disqualifying factor, that invalidates the notion of lishma. And a get, the pasuk says, you write the get, you give her, sign the get, you give her the get. So the pasuk assumes it's a smooth 1, 2, 3 process. So the implication is the get has to be on a piece of cloth or a piece of paper, so he can pick it up and hand it to the witness. The witness is signed, you pick it up, you hand it to the lady. In our case, she's in Israel, but that would be the normative case. So what would happen if you wrote a get on a eucalyptus leaf, which is large, and it's still attached to the eucalyptus tree? That would invalidate the shma, because you'd have to cut it before you could take it away and hand it to the witness, okay? Ein kaisvin b'mechubar l'karka, you cannot write a get on something that's still attached to the ground. But Kosfu al hamachubar, but if you did write it on the eucalyptus leaf, lechubar lakarka, talush, and then you detached it, v'chasmo, and then the witnesses signed it, v'nasna, and you then handed it to the lady. According to Reb Meir, b'di'evet kosher. I added the word b'di'evet. Okay? So it can't be that Rebbe Meir would say it has to be written lishma, because he just told you it doesn't have to be written lishma. The Rebbe Eliezer, if you say it's Rebbe Eliezer, Ksiva boy, you do require lishma. But he says it's similar to other contracts. At least b'di'evet, if it was totally unwitnessed, if there were no witness signatures, it would still be at least b'di'evet valid. Chasima lo boy, you do not need signatures. Let's say, okay, but the mission is still really like Rebbe Eliezer. Ki lo boy, the Rebbe Eliezer chasima lishma. When Rebbe Eliezer says, I do not require signatures of people who went through the get first before they signed it, that's only midiraisa. That's only a Torah din. Midrabanan. But the rabbis built in safeguards, and they do require knowledgeable, meaning they read the text, they saw it was lishma, from the witnesses. Because we're now going to learn that there are three kinds of gittin that are valid min haTorah, but invalid on a rabbinic level. The low boy, Rebbe Eliezer chasima lishma, because, and these will demonstrate that, okay, the Tanan, we have a brisa, or rather another Mishnah. Gimel gittin paislin, there are three invalid gittin lechatchila, ve'im nisas havlad kosher. But if she remarries anyway and has children, they are kosher yidden, they are not mamzerin. In other words, b'di'eved, the get is valid because it's min haTorah valid. Kasav b'chtav yado v'eino lavedim. What if a husband wrote a holographic get, meaning it's in his handwriting, and then they're fighting at the kitchen table. He takes a napkin. He writes the proper text for a get. He hands it to her. She takes it between her fingers. All the other rules are followed. Yesh alav. Okay, that's one case. So that's not a valid get. She should not lachatchila go get married. But if she did, the kids are not mamzerim. Second case. Yesh alav eidim v'yein bazman. What? Pardon me? The husband managed to write the letters correctly, the correct form, the correct text. I mean, I'm not a sofer, but I could write, I know how to make a ches with a little tent on top. He did it. He knew enough that somebody looking at it would say, oh, this is a get. Okay, so that's case one. None of these are all theoretical because it wouldn't happen. But if it did, her kids wouldn't be mamzer. Okay, next case. Yeshel of Eidim v'ein bazman. The get was written by a sofer lishma. The Eidim signed it lishma, but they left the date out. So theoretically, she could have gotten pregnant before he gave her the get. In other words, it creates a new set of issues. Nevertheless, we accept it and we do not make the kid mamzerim b'di'eved. Third case, yesh bozman, they did have the date, everything was right. The ein bo ela eid echad. There was only one witness who signed on it. So a contract is not normally valid with only one witness. Hare elu shalosh gittin psulin. All of these are lichatchila, no good gittin. The imnisas havlad kosher. But nonetheless, if circumstances conspire to her remarrying illegally and having babies, those babies are not condemned to mamzerus. Okay. Now, Rabbi Eliezer, I'm sorry. Afal pisha eno lavedim. Let's go back to the first case. So I was a little bit wrong. He can't write it and hand it to her at the kitchen table. He has to schlep in a couple of neighbors to watch him hand it to her at the kitchen table. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Afal pisha eno lavedim, even if there were no witnesses on the get. Ella shenasna la mipnei Adam, but she gives it to her in the presence of Adam. Now I would do 3, just to cover my bets, because that was a machlaikis. Kosher. He says not only it's a kosher get, and presumably lechatchila. V'gova minichasim mishubadim. And if I had a document that Kenny owes me money and it's not signed by Adam or maybe by only one aide, I could go to Besdin, and if I could prove it's in Kenny's handwriting, they would permit me to take property from him to satisfy the debt. She'ein ha'edim chos min al haget elam mipnei tikun ha'olam. Because the only reason a Torah document does not require witnesses to preclude trouble in the future where the husband says, I was coerced into writing that get, so it would be invalid. I was drunk when I wrote that get, it would be invalid. I'm manic depressive and I was on a mania when I wrote that get. There are many possibilities why a document could be invalidated because of the status or the opinion of the man. He has to do it lishma. He has to mean it with no exceptions or conditions. So therefore, we require him to say this is completely lishma. Witnesses have to hear it. They have to validate the text. They have to sign it. But all of that is a nicety to preclude future problems. Now, the next inning goes over. Should I keep going?
Just go.
Okay. Ella Reb Meir. So let's try. So therefore, it couldn't have been Revelation. So let's try. Maybe it is really Rebbe Meir. The Chilo boy, Rebbe Meir, Ksiva Lishma Midiraisa. Reb Meir does not require any of those niceties, like it has to be Lishma. If it's written and it's signed, that's genug. Okay, Midiranan, my boy. Only rabbinically do we require he has to be willing and he has to mean it wholeheartedly, etc., etc. Vaha Amar Reb Nachman, because Reb Nachman told us, Amar Hoya Rebbe Meir would tell you, and this is kind of cool. Afilu matzo biyashba. Even his name is Abraham. His wife's name is Sarah. He's rooting through the garbage outside the Besdin, and he finds a get in the garbage that happens to say, I, Abraham, divorced my wife, Sarah. So the names are right, and the date is right. In other words, all the technical conditions are right, except it's not, of course, Lishma. And now that guy comes, and he gets 2 witnesses to sign off on that get. He hands it to them. He says, this is the right text, check it. It's Lishma on my part, not on the Sofer's part. So therefore, it's a technical violation of Lishma. V'nasnu and he gives it to his wife, kosher. It's considered that they are divorced. So at least with the Eved, you do not lead the Shema according to Reb Meir. So that creates an issue for our Mishnah that it might not be Reb Meir. Okay, tune in.
Go ahead, just finish up. I want to just.
Tune in tomorrow at the stipulated time if you wish to continue in a tzibur.
I just want to point out, you can see that the Gemara is actually setting us up for what's going to be another major machloket. Do you need when are two edim really required? Is it at the kativa, or is it at what we'll call the mesira, the delivery?
The handing it over.
Okay, and that's going to be another whole area of machloket,
Which we introduced.
okay, which is initially subtly brought here, but ultimately.
Well, it wasn't so subtle, but it was not spelled out. It was just the facts are given here. The rationale is not. Okay.
I will put it back.
Okay, Melvin, I'm not in my normal. Where's Melvin?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not in my normal spot. I'm on the other side. I think it's car 3. Maybe it's car 4.
Thank you very much.
Shkaya.
Okay, yes,
Have a good
well.
night. Shabbos, everybody. Shabbos, Mavorchim.
I never did locate where he was, but hopefully the next time.
What time is it normally?
Okay, normally it's after the 7:30.
What?
About 8:30.
I'm not interested. When Mashiach comes, I just the Gemara says you're not supposed to go. I heard. Not only did you say Hallel, but you led.
All right.
Did they respond to you?
Yes, they did.
Did they respond?
But what time on Shabbos?
The bulletin, the bulletin usually tells.
Here it says
Shabbos
Daf
is.
Yomi
It says Daf Yomi
is 5:20.
5:20 tomorrow.
Oh, okay. I think I'm got a fever, so. But I went to see him last night in
Very
Hollywood.
nice. In Hollywood.
It was MDY,
And
and I drove all the way down there.
yeah.
Well, okay, Baruch Hashem. It was a nice fever.
Good.